What's good? It's Woog. I want to give some early thoughts on the trilogy fight between Saul Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin, Triple G. This is a long-awaited trilogy fight after their highly disputed, very high-quality two fights that, you've got a divided public on who should have come out with the victories or what the end result should have been after those two fights. The first fight was a long-awaited showdown where Canelo was still kind of seen as being the newcomer to the middleweight division, even though he dabbled against, Miguel Cotto, who was a 140, then 147, and even 154 pounder who had success at 160 but was never truly viewed as a middleweight. So Canelo dabbled there, and then he dabbled with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who for the life of him can't make weight. There was a catch weight in Chavez versus Canelo, and Canelo pretty much beat him up from pillar to post. Canelo's fight with Miguel Cotto was much more competitive, although I thought Canelo probably did enough to edge it. You get some differing opinions on that fight as well. But the Gennady Golovkin crowd, the people who had seen him just fight over fight demolish contenders in the middleweight division while earning, several of the belts in the division. He went on this 20+ fight knockout streak, not win streak. I'm talking about a knockout streak, and he was just building his name over a few years fighting on HBO. But those who had seen Triple G, one of the most prodigious punchers, pound for pound in the sport, not to mention a very good boxer with an excellent jab, which he used to control David Lemieux for the whole fight before stopping him. People thought that Triple G, by and large, was going to beat Canelo, if not outright stop Canelo. So when Canelo beat Chavez Jr. and then in the post-fight interview basically said, "I'm not effing afraid of nobody, let's get this on," between, basically calling out Triple G, the boxing public was like, oh my God, it's about to happen. And so we get the fight, and, boxing is such an expectations game that when we see Triple G, the patient hunter, trying to track Canelo down, Canelo moving around the ring, and Canelo, to be fair, setting up the prettier, cleaner looking shots and combinations against Triple G, Canelo got off to a fast start to where I really think that the draw, which was the result of their first fight, was somewhat a byproduct of the expectation going into Triple G versus Canelo, and the fact that since Canelo exceeded expectations, whether or not you feel like he earned a draw, a win, a loss, exceeded expectations and then banked some of those early rounds, I feel like the judging kind of gets lazy where you get used to checking one person's box based on their performance and based on them exceeding the expectations, not to mention when Triple G, again, I feel like he was winning majority of those middle and late rounds. But when Triple G was trying to trap Canelo, you saw him let go with his power punches and the same fight finishing types of punches that he was blasting Curtis Stevens, Willie Monroe Jr., Marco Antonio Rubio, Martin Murray, Daniel Gill, the list goes on. The fight finishing punches that Triple G was landing on them, it seemed like he was missing Canelo with some of the most significant power punch attempts that he was launching. So you get the feeling that Canelo wasn't really receiving the full, impact of Triple G's offensive onslaught, and he's setting up these pretty counter punches, these nice combinations, and then moving across the ring to buy more time. Canelo Alvarez did a lot better than I imagined that he would do against Triple G in the first fight. But when you heard the decision, the split draw, you felt so bad for Triple G that he has such a disadvantageous and unfortunate outcome in that fight, to where when they announced a rematch, it's like, okay, they're going to settle the score. Then Canelo tested positive for the clenbuterol, received his suspension. Meanwhile, Triple G then fights, Vinas Martirosyan, a never 160-pounder. Vinas Martirosyan was a 154 guy who was fighting competitive fights with the likes of Erislandy Lara and even Jermell Charlo. But Vinas Martirosyan got disposed of within 2 rounds, devastating knockout for Triple G. So now we're in like 2018. Triple G is now not 34, 35 years old, but he's 36, almost 37 years old. And then he gets back in the ring with Canelo for the rematch. And for all of the exceeding expectations that took place in that first fight, Canelo did even better in the second fight, to where instead of, trying to be the boxer puncher and moving around the ring, trying to buy time and so forth, Canelo in this fight looked like he was taking the fight to the monster of 160, Triple G. So that was even more shocking than what we were seeing in the first fight. So Canelo Alvarez ends up edging a decision win against Triple G in that rematch, to where it was like, damn, like after those 2 fights, for Triple G, longtime middleweight champion, unified champion, not undisputed, but unified champion, to come out of back-to-back fights with Canelo with a draw and a loss, because Triple G's record was spotless before that point, to come out of the 2 fights with Canelo with a draw and a loss, that was such an altering of their career trajectories, to where it launched Canelo, who would then, obviously go up to 168, test the waters against Rocky Fielding, stop him, come back to 160, beat Daniel Jacobs via decision, go all the way up to 175 to beat a, post-prime Sergey Kovalev, formerly the Crusher. He wasn't still the Crusher at that point. He wasn't the Crusher after he fought, Elliot or Storm Alvarez a second time and started developing, the jab. Well, he always had a jab, but to make that the centerpiece of his game, with the tutelage of Buddy McGirt, that wasn't the same Crusher Kovalev. But Canelo went way up to 175, stopped Kovalev, and then he has that long out of the ring absence where he's going through the promotional dispute with Golden Boy, eventually breaks from them. And then, we didn't think we were going to see Canelo for some time. We thought, I thought that it was going to be a drawn out legal process. But on short notice, they announced Callum Smith versus Canelo Alvarez. And it's like, what? Damn, because Callum Smith was an undefeated fighter. So at this point, this is when Canelo sets his sights on 168 and basically goes on a warpath there, beating Callum Smith via lopsided decision where he just busted up Callum Smith's arm. Callum Smith was really never in that fight. And then he fights Abdi Yildirim, knocks him out in the 3rd round, and then he stops Billy Joe Saunders and Callum Smith. And while there are Canelo critics who look at that crop of 168-pound champions who, by the way, were never fighting each other, you had like Zurdo Ramirez, you had David Benavidez, you had Caleb Plant, you had, Callum Smith, you had these different champions, and then later you had Billy Joe Saunders as one of the champions, the WBO champ at the time. But you had these champions who were never fighting each other. They were just sitting on their own islands, not unifying any of the titles. So one, it was a very bad look for all of them when Canelo storms the gates at 168 and basically dismantles all of the champions, collecting all 4 of the belts. Yes, he did collect 2 belts in one fight against Callum Smith because David Benavidez lost his title on the scale, lost it for non-fight reasons for the second time. And so when Callum Smith defended his WBA belt against Canelo, the WBC belt was up. The vacant belt was up for grabs in that fight as well. But yeah, as bad as it made the 168-pound champions look, that you had this smaller Canelo storming the gates and beating them all, it made Canelo look like an absolute all-timer the way that he handled that rampage at 168. So while you had that for Canelo in the post-Triple G fights part of Canelo's career, you had Triple G, fighting Steve Rolls about, a little less than a year later after that second fight with Canelo, beat Steve Rolls in the 4th round, didn't look great in the first couple rounds, but he stopped Rolls in the 4th round, and then he had that fight that many thought Sergey Derevianchenko fought a razor-close fight with Triple G where Derevianchenko had like unprecedented good success against Triple G, backing him up, hurting him to the body, to where many people heading into the scorecards thought Triple G had lost the fight. And to many people, that was the first time that they, with their own eyes, saw Triple G lose a fight. I know he was awarded a decision loss against Canelo in their rematch, but many never thought that they saw Triple G lose until he fought Derevianchenko. But as fate would have it, Triple G was actually awarded a close unanimous decision win over Derevianchenko in that fight in October 2019. So Triple G fights Steve Rolls, fights Derevianchenko, then is out of the ring for over a year, fights Kamil Cizeremeta in December 2020. That's, the COVID pandemic 2020. He fights him in December of that year, stops him in the 7th round. He wins just about every round, but people are then wondering, damn, does it look like he's a step slower, that he's not as destructive as he used to be? Is he losing something? That was kind of the idea of Triple G in those 3 fights following the rematch with Canelo Alvarez. So now Triple G's like 38, almost 39 years old. And then in April of 2022, Triple G fights Ryota Murata to kind of cleverly earn another share of the middleweight belt, because, there's one of the most frustrating things in boxing is what's been taking place at the 160-pound division. The fact that you haven't had, Demetrius Andrade be able to secure a fight with Triple G, who they were both on DAZN, or Andrade secure a fight with Jermell Charlo, the WBC champ, because Andrade is the WBO champ, and Triple G, after his fight with Derevianchenko, was the IBF champ. So you haven't had, Andrade versus Charlo, Andrade versus Triple G, anybody versus Munguia, Jaime Munguia. You haven't had Charlo versus Triple G. It's just been super frustrating at 160. So Triple G kind of takes like a backdoor approach to earning a WBA belt against the other belt holder, Ryota Murata. So it's like you're not willing to fight Demetrius Andrade, the WBO champ, the WBC champ, Jermall Charlo, who a lot of people want to see Triple G and have been wanting to see Triple G fight one of these guys, right? But he's going to fight Ryota Murata, the most vulnerable and clearly like the worst. I mean, a good fighter, but given those different champions, the worst belt holder in the division. So Triple G is able to unify 2 of the belts, the IBF belt and the WBA belt, by fighting Ryota Murata, TKOs him in the 9th round. And, Ryota Murata has some success against Triple G as well. But I was saying all that to illustrate the different paths that they've been on, with Canelo going this way and Triple G kind of hitting a plateauing. Now, to his credit, he does technically have wins over Derevianchenko and Murata in this post-Canelo part of his career. So it's not like he's been totally inactive. He wasn't as active as many would like. He wasn't fighting the guys who people wanted to see him fight. But, he did win all 4 of his fights, right? And he did fight some quality opponents. He fought better opponents in that interim than we've seen Jaime Munguia fight at 160. And quite frankly, better than we've seen Jermall Charlo fight at 160, because Jermall Charlo's best win is still the decision win against Derevianchenko, who Jermall Charlo, to his credit, beat more convincingly than Triple G did. But now we've got this trilogy fight between Canelo Alvarez and Triple G, and my early thoughts on this one are just, I can't unsee the damage that Murata appeared to be doing when he was backing Triple G up in those early rounds, when he was especially going to the body, and the discomfort that we saw in Triple G in taking those shots to the body. Yes, we did also see Triple G have to dig super deep against Canelo in the rematch, where, man, you want to talk about just a sensational fight. Go rewatch the rematch between Canelo and Triple G. What a wonderful fight. So back and forth. And they both gave it all they had. And, I think that Triple G almost gets graded on a curve, because if we don't see him destroying his opponent, we're assuming, oh, Triple G must be in trouble. Oh, Triple G must not be winning this fight. It's like, nah, he's just fighting a different style fight, and he's working primarily behind a jab, and the jab is basically winning him the rounds. But to see him go so jab heavy against Canelo in the rematch, most people just weren't expecting to see that. So you have a very divided public. Many people actually feel that Canelo deserved the decision win against Triple G in the rematch. Some people thought Triple G. I tend to believe that it could have gone either way. That was a very tough fight to score, and it was a very, very competitive fight where I don't look at the Canelo decision win as being a robbery, but I do look at that 2-fight combination of results for Triple G as being totally unfortunate. If anything, that first fight being a decision draw, a split draw, was closer to a robbery than the decision win for Canelo in the rematch. As much as Triple G has an argument on winning that rematch, again, largely behind the jab. So with this third fight, we now have a 40-year-old Triple G, and we have a Canelo Alvarez who just lost up at 175 trying to take on Dmitry Bivol. But if you want to think about public sentiment for a moment, just check this out. People believed, and I thought Canelo was going to pull off the decision win against Dmitry Bivol. I thought it would be close and largely disputed, but I thought so highly of Canelo, as did many, that we just assumed that he was going to walk over Dmitry Bivol, the undefeated WBA champion at 175, with wins over Jean Pascal, Joe Smith Jr., Sullivan Barrera. He's beaten some very good fighters, Craig Richards. And we thought that Canelo not only was going to beat Dmitry Bivol, but that he would come back to handle business against Triple G in the Trilogy fight, then would go back to 175 and fight the winner of Artur Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr. We saw how that one played out. Sheesh. But we thought that Canelo was going to basically become undisputed champion at light heavyweight. That's how good Canelo's performances at 168 were looking. That's how much of a buzzsaw he appeared to be and still might be. Like, I don't want to make too much of his decision loss against Dmitry Bivol. Yes, those scorecards, 115 to 113, were totally bogus. You might be able to find 3 rounds to give Canelo in that fight. But damn, 7 rounds to 5, that was an atrocity. But in the wake of that decision loss against Dmitry Bivol, now I feel like expectations have come back to earth just a little bit, to where people are kind of looking at Canelo versus Triple G3 with a fresher set of eyes. Because, before this Canelo lost to Bivol, the large widespread assumption was that Canelo was going to finish Triple G. Even those who thought Triple G won one or both of those fights against Canelo, those same people still thought, because of Triple G's age and because of how much Canelo seemed to be improving beyond that point, felt that Canelo was going to get the stoppage against Triple G. So my early impressions are, I can't unsee Triple G's wearing of his body damage, right? When he gets hit to the body, the way he takes that big breath through his nose, takes a step back, and reassesses. But that's kind of always been his thing. You will even find moments of that in Triple G versus Daniel Jacobs, a very competitive fight. That was Triple G's last fight before his first fight with Canelo Alvarez, was the decision. Close, competitive, but unanimous decision win against Daniel Jacobs. We've seen Triple G, kind of get hit a bit and see how he and then gets back to the task, right? Triple G is so damn durable, and he's such a professional. The fact that he's been fighting at middleweight this whole time shows how devoted he is to his craft and how professional he is. But man, this is a tough task ahead of him. Now, I want to think about motivation here. Who is more motivated in this rematch? Is it Triple G to right the historic wrong as he sees it? Or is it Canelo who wants to put a punctuation on this rivalry and wants to close it out in emphatic and violent, devastating fashion, leaving no doubt? Who's got more motivation here between Canelo and Triple G? I feel like they both have a ton of motivation here. But Triple G, I feel like there's almost a lifelike mission statement here because of how those 2 fights with Canelo impacted his legacy and his career, because it went from him being a bona fide all-timer to a, he had those unfortunate results against Canelo Alvarez, but he is still an all-time great, top 5 all-time middleweight type of fighter. I think that that's still the consensus, but man, those results do kind of stain the otherwise perfect record for Triple G. So if he's able to come back and beat Canelo Alvarez, that would be one of the more improbable. Again, as good as he performed, Triple G did against Canelo in those first 2 fights, even if the expectations were that he was going to do even better than that, the fact that he probably deserved a win in at least one of those 2 fights. Despite that and the success, the 4 fights that he's won since that, the fact that he's 40 years old is probably one of the most relevant statistics here. And the fact that Canelo has been fighting well above middleweight. Now, this fight's going to be a 168, a weight class that Triple G's never competed in. But, Canelo won all the belts at 168, competed well at 175. And so for him to come back to 168, which I feel like he's more or less settled in to, I don't feel like he's got to lose an uncomfortable amount of weight. Triple G should be able to kind of slide right into 168 as well. So I don't think the size is going to be too much of a factor here. But I can't help but look at the 40-year-old age and the slow starts that Triple G has had in some of these recent fights, to where we're going to do a full preview on this when we get closer to the fight date. It's not until September 17th. So we will do a deeper dive and analysis of this matchup. But my gut tells me that it's going to be more competitive than people might think. I think that Triple G is going to win a few rounds. But at the end of the day, I'm wondering, is Canelo going to win a competitive decision win? Or is he actually going to stop Triple G? And right now, my gut is kind of telling me Canelo via stoppage. But yeah, we'll take a deeper dive going closer to the fight day. Let me know what you think in your early thoughts on Canelo versus Triple G3. Let me know that in the comments. And please, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.